Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Full Tank Motorcycle Podcast. It's me, Rob, from the YouTube channel Motorbob, and as always, I'm joined by Tim. And this week, we thought we'd dive into some Q&As about all the bikes that have been announced over the past couple of weeks. It's been very busy in terms of news since EICMA, and so thank you very much to the viewers of the main channel who responded to the community post that I put up asking for questions. So let's dive straight in. Number one is from Dreading Bath, and he asks, does the Moto Guzzi V100 Stelvio that was announced at EICMA last week have what it takes to take on the mighty GS, which I assume they're talking about the most recent iteration, the 1300. Now, Tim, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on this, being a Moto Guzzi man.
Yeah, Moto Guzzi enthusiast. To be honest, I don't necessarily link the two together. I think part of it, I was trying to sort of work out why that would be. The GS has that reputation of the off-road stuff, and I think for that reason I don't necessarily link them in my head, even though they sit in the same class. And especially with it is more road-focused, isn't it? The big GS is one that can go off-road, but generally speaking, you're using it as a tourer, quite a sporty tourer as well. So yeah, they tick different categories. I think they're going to appeal to different markets as well because of that.
Yeah, maybe. I think on paper they look kind of similar. You know, it's got the shaft drive. It's obviously an adventure bike. You've got the cylinder head sticking out either side with them both being transverse mounted twins. Quite techy as well. Like the Moto Guzzis come straight in with radars front and rear. So it's got some of the similar rider rates like active cruise control and blind spot warnings and things like that. So on paper, there's a lot of similarities. But I think three key differences really. Like one will be the power level. One's like 120, I think, is it for the Moto Guzzi, or maybe a little less. The GS is up near 150 now with the most recent version. And I think in people's minds, that just puts them in a slightly different group of competition. Yeah. And then you've got the sort of image, which is more aesthetically minded, perhaps, the Moto Guzzi, and it's got a bit more charm to it, whereas the BMW is perhaps more utilitarian. I think so, yeah. I think it's seeing it on the stand, mate. I mean, we've seen the spy shots, but I thought they've done really well with the finishes. They look very nice. Right. But the main sort of display model at EICMA was on spoke rims with like some Pirelli Scorpion STRs or whatever, semi-knobbly tyres. Yeah. And it's up on this stand, and it just looked fantastic, mate. Honestly, the stance of it, the details, the lighting, you know, those really good tail lights they put on. Yeah. I think it might be a real potential competitor against the Africa Twin for one of the best looking full-size adventure bikes on the market.
Although very different styles, right? Because they've taken very different lines on that. I mean, like Honda's gone straight into the utilitarian, like quite angular, like
it looks like big dirt bike, doesn't it?
Exactly that, yeah. But they kind of nailed that, and the Moto Guzzi, very different stance. It just sort of looks like a taller, sort of jacked up version of the V100, which isn't a bad thing.
Yes, both nice looking bikes.
Smoother lines, kind of, I don't know, it looks more designed, as in artistically designed, maybe, naturally designed as opposed to sort of man-made, where the Honda is more, angular.
Yeah, perhaps, especially the most recent update this year to the Africa Twin. They've just chiseled it even more, so it's getting a little bit more modern looking.
Yeah, them cheekbones are looking real sharp.
Yeah. But then the third thing I was thinking as well is just the fact that the Moto Guzzi is coming into this market. I know they've made Stelvios before, but it really does feel like kind of new ground again.
So removed from previous Stelvios, yeah, exactly. I think that for me, it's a weird thing, but if a bike, because all of the stuff that they've kind of thrown at that, I say thrown, that's kind of a harsh term in terms of what they've done. Obviously, it's finesse.
Considered.
Yeah, very well considered. But I think when a brand implements a lot of new things, even though they're not brand new to the market, we've seen them on other bikes, I sort of in my head give them more kudos, or I'm more excited for it, I suppose, when they've done something new, as opposed to the GS has been like highly tech focused for a long while and at the leading edge of a lot of different things. So that one, it's like it's a minor incremental change on a bike that was already phenomenal. So in my head, they sort of give more praise to the brand that's coming at it fresh, even though you think, well, this is their first stab at it. Like, have they got it right the first time out?
We'll try and get one to ride to find out. But I do get what you're saying. It's more exciting to see brands move into new territory. But I think what it realistically means is that the GS is probably going to still be the better bike because it's been refined with these small iterations over time that just make it better and better and better and better. And I was saying to you earlier how, you know, if you look at the press releases, it is broad strokes for the Moto Guzzi. Like, it's got radars, it's got a liquid-cooled engine, it's a new adventure bike. Whereas when you read the press release for the new GS, it's talking about how they've obviously refined the engine slightly, they've made some tweaks to the telelever front end, the front suspension that make it even better.
Yes.
And so I'd be very, very surprised if the Moto Guzzi gets near it in terms of performance, but also sales. I mean, it's just never going to even compete.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd be surprised. But as for which one will be more appealing to me, I mean, we'll have to ride them to find out, but I just really can't wait. At first glances, I can't wait to ride the Stelvio. Maybe it's that novelty excitement that you were just talking about.
I think so. I think for me it is, definitely.
Next up, we've got Frank Torre, and his question would be, which do you think will get first on the market? The newly spied, let's call it Daytona 660R from Triumph, or the Yamaha R9? I'm not sure if you're across this saga, Tim.
I'm not. They're not bikes I would automatically link. I know we mentioned them last time out. But,
so look, regularly on the main channel, we do kind of roundups of rumors, and maybe for 2-3 years now, every time I try and look for something fresh to talk about in terms of what bikes we might expect, there's always like copyrights or patents involving the name Yamaha R9 and some other variants, to be fair. But that's just one bike, I think, because the MT-09 is so good, the XSR 900, you know, that people really want to see is a inline triple powered sports bike that's sort of not as serious as an R1, but also the R7 with the parallel twin from the MT-07 maybe is not quite punchy enough for some people. And it's such a peach, that triple engine in the MT-09, that it'd be a great sports bike as well. And people would I mean, not that I was kind of helping, because I did say I think that I thought it might come this year, but people were certain it was coming in at EICMA, the R9, and it didn't. Sad times.
Yeah. So which one do you think is more likely, was the question, which one's coming out first?
Absolutely 100% the Daytona.
Yeah, I would say
it's
so.
Based upon the Trident and the Tiger Sport 660. So we know that that's an area that Triumph are pushing into. And also we've seen spy shots, videos of it riding around. So I think that's imminent, realistically. It looks like it's almost finished. Whereas we've seen patents and copyrights and maybe like some design renders by third parties of an R9. But I haven't seen any spy shots yet, so...
No. So they've not been out testing it, or at least no one's grabbed a picture of it being tested.
And also, you know, I'm lucky enough to speak to people who work at motorcycle companies, and obviously I bring these things up, things that the audience want to see or are excited about. And they always say the same thing, which is like, what people say in YouTube comments isn't necessarily what happens down at the dealer. And so... even if loads of people do say they're dying to see an R9, maybe actually from Yamaha's research, it's not something that people would go and spend their money on, or it's not a market sector that's worth moving into for them. So maybe it just won't happen. Who knows?
Possibly. I mean, it's one of the, I completely get where they're coming from. Because when people are sort of, if they're excited by it, like you say, it's not necessarily where their safe money might go. You might get a couple of people, but chances are, and if you're leading towards what's actually going to sell and not just make something for the sake of making something, then yeah.
The Triumph Sporty 660, I'd say next few months, realistically, it's got to be. Next question is from Tom G8673. When are you going to get your hands on that new Triumph 400 Scrambler? Looking forward to hearing what you think. Cheers from Montana, which I like it when people put their location in their questions and comments, because it's exciting to think of somebody on the other side of the world listening and watching. So thanks for that. Now, you've across these as well, mate. You're quite excited, are you, about the little 400 Triumphs? I
literally watched a video this morning for Revzilla.
Oh, I watched that as well.
It was good.
The road trip in India.
Yeah. And they did. I was curious because I've seen, very little on actually how they are real world. I can make assumptions based on my experiences and stuff, but you don't know until you see it out in the wilds. And handles well.
I think it looks like such a fantastic little bike, the Scrambler. We discussed it in the last episode, I believe, actually. And it's one that, I think is going to be a big seller. The price looks really tempting. Yeah, as for getting hold of bikes, well, in India, I think they've already let the press ride some of these bikes because that's probably where they're realistically going to sell the most units. I believe the press launches at some point in the next few months for Europe. So almost immediately after that, we'll get one. I don't think I've really talked about it on the podcast or the channel, but my plan this year is not to do so many international trips. So we'll just try and get the bikes back here rather than having to fly everywhere just to shoot one day of riding. So hopefully we can be a bit more in depth with it. And it's certainly one that if we can get one of each, the Speed and the Scrambler, we could do our own Revzilla style road trip. But we won't
slightly less epic than the tallest road.
Yeah, they went to the tallest road in the world, is it? In the Himalayas?
Yeah, Himalayas, yeah. We
could go for the tallest road in Wales. South Wales?
Cool.
Black Mountain Pass or something like that?
Let's do it,
We could make it similarly grueling and epic by just going when the weather's bad. And
exactly that.
Okay,
yeah. We'll go through 4 seasons in one day and make sure we really do it properly.
That's a long way of saying basically next couple of months. Now, Yajorpan6141 asks, looking at the styling of the Aprilia RS457 and the Suzuki GSX-1000GX, what's your opinion on the looks for both bikes as compared to the rivals of each one respectively? Are they good looking as compared to the rivals, or are they meh? Now, Tim, I'd thoroughly encourage you to Google each one just so you can refresh your eyes and mind.
So I've got the images on there. I think what we need to do is define what their competition is.
So for the RS457, Ninja 400 maybe? Or
yeah.
Is there a little CBR as well? Honda CBR?
The 500, right?
500, yeah, that's probably a fair point. Let's use those as a reference. And I don't want to, taint your decision, Tim.
All right, you want it clean? My decision is that the Aprilia is anything but meh, but then it's an Aprilia, and I would expect that from them.
Yes.
So I like the look of that. I mean, they're big on styling.
Yes. You know what is kind of interesting looking at these 3 bikes is they're so typical, like you're just saying, actually, of their respective design languages.
Yeah.
The Ninja 400 looks exactly what you'd expect a Ninja. In fact, it's the 500 now, isn't it? They just updated it.
Yes,
EICMA.
they have, yeah.
Ninja 500 is like a baby ZX-10R. It's just like a super bike it's green, it's angular, but it's got skinny wheels because it's not a big bike. Same for the CBR 500R. It looks like in many respects, mini Fireblade. And that's what you can say of the RS457. It's like a baby RSV4 or RS660. And I think that's just what people want. If they're buying an A2 bike or they want something in small capacity, you still want the image of the brand.
Yeah, I suppose the trickle down was like you would see, it'd be the bike that you see in BSP or you see it in MotoGP. You want to feel like you are your favorite rider on that bike, Yeah. So even if you're going for the smaller version of it, even down to a 125 like Yamaha do, and Aprilia I think have a 125. If they haven't, they've had it in the past. But you want to feel like you are the same as your favorite racer.
I think looking at it, both, especially the Kawasaki, very angular. The Honda also is a little bit like that, quite busy.
Yeah.
The RS457 feels more restrained in terms of lines.
Yep.
And I'd say for me, it's the best looking of the bunch.
I would agree. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. They've got some flourish to them.
Next was the Suzuki GSX-1000.
The Suzuki, I have different feelings on.
Really? What would you compare this to then? Yamaha R7?
R7.
Honda CBR 650R?
Yes. Yeah, I would say so.
Ninja
Kawasaki,
650?
Yeah, I was going to say it. I mean, to be fair to Suzuki, my issue is with the class in general, I think. I think probably my favourite of those, the R7's not bad. I quite like the looks of the R7.
I'd agree.
They've done something with the headlights and stuff. It's just, I don't know, the front end basically. The Suzuki, I like most of what they've done. The thing I cannot get on with this new breed of bikes is double stacked headlights.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know why. I do know why. I feel like it's going to date. I feel like it looks good, but it has a very short half-life. That you look at that in 2 years' time and it'll be out of date. Is my feeling. Interesting.
We'll get onto that in a moment because it's on one of their other bikes and I think it's an improvement. But I take what you're saying. it's a bit of a fad at the moment. The new Honda NX500, which is an update to the CB500X, also has what look like stacked headlights. I think they've kind of, it's not actually two projectors, but it just feels like everyone's jumping on that sort of bandwagon, and maybe it will burn out quite quickly. I'm going to say what I think about this class is that naturally, to be a good middleweight usable sports bike that's not necessarily just for the track but also for day-to-day duties, commuting, just going out for a ride, the bars have to be quite high up and the seat has to be fairly low, so you actually sat up like a naked bike, and the result is a sports bike looking thing with a full fairing that actually has less of the tail up, hunched down aggressive look of a genuine thoroughbred sports bike. And that's probably why I think the R7 just looks the best out of the bunch, because it's the one with the least comfortable riding position, because it's actually quite focused, given that it's in that middleweight segment. It's low at the bars. You can see the bars, they're like tight to the tank, and the tail looks a bit more up, and that's why it just looks aggressive and desirable, whereas the Honda, a little less so. It's a bit stubby on the tail and a little low on the tail. Same for the Ninja. It's got very high bars that are nearly above the tank. And this GSX-8R, I think it looks better than the Kawasaki, better than the Honda, but still it would be even better looking if it was just canted forward a little bit. But personally, I think it's not a bad job.
Honestly, I think it's not a bad job. It's just if it's I don't know, slightly off the mark for me, and only ever so slightly.
Myrtle Canaz Gennaro 9411 asks, will Yamaha be going to bring back the legendary R6, which is an interesting question, because a few years ago you'd have said, well, the middleweight, like genuine sports bikes, not those ones we were just talking about, but actually revvy super sport type bikes, that market looked as if it had died off, because everyone had moved to adventure bikes and naked bikes that are more practical but still super fast. There were barely any on sale in the UK at one point. I think we had the R6 available as a track bike, but the Gixxer 600 had gone, the CBR 600 had gone. I think the ZX6R was off the market for a while, but then all of a sudden the ZX6R is back in Kawasaki's lineup, and then at EICMA, Honda re-announced the CBR 600RR. They had been selling it in some Asian markets with this updated front end and stuff, but actually for 2024 it's back, and it's not just kind of like the old bike. It's got genuine changes like an inertial measurement unit and tweaks to the engine, tweaks to the chassis, a new look. I've got to say, mate, it looks fantastic. Have you had a look? If you search for 2024 CBR 600 RR.
Let me find that.
What a handsome motorcycle. It's like a baby Fireblade in all the best ways. And then it's got the underseat exhaust, which I personally really like as well. I think it gives it a bit of flair and je ne sais quoi.
Yeah.
What are you thinking?
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Cool, isn't it?
It's a very, it can be, with designs like this, and we're talking about the Aprilia as well, as obviously previous question to loop back. There's a very particular kind of proportions that if you just skew it ever so slightly the wrong way, it just starts to look ugly. It doesn't take too long, but they really, but it's such a subtle thing. I mean, it'll literally be down to like the curvature of that face. If you change that by a couple of centimeters, it will change the whole look of it. And I think Honda's design team, I've always thought actually that the Fireblade is one of the prettiest of the sports bikes. Or, if you look at the 2005 upwards kind of thing, that era onwards, I always thought the Fireblade was a very pretty bike, and this looks like an old CBR 600, or 1000.
Two things though, mate, on this one. Number one, it is that more aggressive. It's not a beginner-friendly riding position. It's more track-focused. There's lots of track features. So that makes it look more aggressive.
Sure.
Like they've dropped the tank by 10 mil for this year, so you can get your chin in. So it obviously helps to slant it down towards the front. But then also, there's definitely been a design trend towards small mini tail sections. But the fact that it's got a undertail exhaust means actually it's got quite a long passenger seat there, which might be considered a bit old school, but I actually think it looks really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think there are certain things, if I was to critique the Aprilia for anything, it would be that the tail section looks a little out of proportion, like it's a bit short. So I think, this one's a little bit longer is nicer. For me, it's the face. It's first thing you see with it. I am, So the first thing I see is the face on a bike, and yeah, it's that has to hit the mark for me, and I think the Hondas always have.
Fair play. Mohammed Suhail 3655 asks, how does the new Ninja 500 that we just mentioned compare to the likes of the Ninja 400 and the ZX4R? So I believe the Ninja 500 has replaced the Ninja 400. I looked on the Kawasaki website earlier, and they still list last year's 400, but for 2024 it's just the 500. So effectively it's a slight evolution, a bit more capacity. I think there's marginally better performance figures, there's a few tweaks to the spec, but fundamentally what you get in there is a relatively beginner friendly bike. I think some people do ride them on track there, and they have potential in that regard. They're quite lightweight and appealing in that respect, but fundamentally it's still a parallel twin that can be used for newer riders and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
The ZX4R is an inline four, and yes, it's a small engine, but it's really revvy, and you have to keep it singing to, get the most out of it. And so that's going to appeal more to more experienced riders, anyone who wants to do track days on it as well and that sort of thing. So compares to the 400 in that it's the new version of it. It compares to the 4R in that it's going to be more torquey, mid-rangey, a bit more chilled out in the riding position.
Yeah.
And I think probably a bit cheaper as well.
Yeah.
Mate, I think I answered that one. Should we move on to the next one?
I got nothing to add. Crack on. I do like both of them. And to add anything into it, I like a smaller capacity sports bike. I think it's really fun.
With an inline four?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like, I've only ever ridden... I don't think I have ridden... No, I have. I owned a little Balius ZX-250, I think it was sort of close to. And I quite like a little four-cylinder.
Did we call that the Bilius in a previous episode?
I'll have called it a Balius, but you might have referred
to it a Bilius.
Yeah.
Maybe I've stolen someone's joke there. TJS201971 asks, on the GSX-1000GX, which is a new Suzuki tall sports tourer crossover type bike, what's the release date for both the EU and North America? And are you getting on one for testing? Now, have you checked this one out? This was the other big announcement from Suzuki, along with that 8R. You're going to have to be careful when you Google it. GSX-1000GX.
I think, yeah, I've got GSX. What's the S?
S1000
GX.
Mm-hmm. It's basically like, the S1000 XR from BMW, the tall, but sporty crossover, or like a Tracer 9, that kind of area.
Yeah, completely.
I think it looks really, really good. That engine is excellent. In the GT model, also, the GT has quite an ugly front end with two projector lights either side of it, and they look like goggly eyes. Have you seen that bike, the GT?
The GT. Hold on, give me a second.
Have a look at the front end of that. It's now go back to the GX and see if you still think that stacked headlights are a bad idea.
Well, all right. I mean, like, do you want a slap in the face or a kick in the nuts? It's neither one of them are going to be on my shopping list. But that one's a hammerhead shark, man. Look at it.
Yeah, that's not a good look for the front end. I wish it had the stacked headlights from this. I think they just look more, I don't know, sharper.
Yeah, given the compromise, I'd go for the stacked headlights for sure, because it points the nose in a little bit too much. Sorry, a little bit more, which is nicer. This one, just weird. Like a duck beak.
Very weird. Now look, the GX, mate, is their first ever motorcycle with semi-active electronically adjustable suspension. Surprising, isn't it? But they're not necessarily always at the forefront of pushing new tech.
No, I was, not surprising that they haven't had it before. Just pleasantly surprised that they actually do have it. Because, Suzuki are usually on the tail end of development, not to be owned kind.
They've gone all in though, mate. This has got everything. Like, I was impressed when I was reading the specs. They sent a really detailed PDF over. And it's not like they've just gone, well, let's take a first stab at it and something pretty average will do. It actually has all the kind of like self-leveling for preload and anti-dive. And there was some other impressive stuff in there. I'd have to dig it out. It's in my EICMA video where I mentioned it briefly. But it goes very much. Skyhook is the other thing where
Skyhook suspension
hung from the sky and the bike stays level, but the wheels track the surface of the road.
So it's got that in there.
Yes, it's Skyhook,
mate. That is leading edge.
Have you ever seen that video on YouTube? Sorry if we've talked about this before, but it's of the Multistrada V4S going down some stairs.
No, I don't think I have seen that.
Man, we'll cut this into the video, but I'll send you a link right now so you can watch it. But that's got Skyhook, and it kind of pretty much demonstrates exactly what it's meant to do. It would be good to see it next to a non-Skyhook bike.
Yes.
I mean, would you do that? Ride it down some stairs?
A multi-strada. I mean, it's an adventure bike, yeah. Oh,
But
that's
look
weird.
at the body of the bike, how the body of the bike barely moves, just the wheels are moving. Very impressive, I think.
That is quite impressive. You're right, though. I do want to see a non-sky-hooked regular suspension bike compete with that.
Generally on YouTube, nothing's ever good enough. Like if we put out...
Hold on, so this is just his bike that he's doing that on? This is just some...
It's just
legend.
a random guy.
Absolute legend.
It's not a press bike.
Nice.
Yeah, like I would say generally on YouTube, even if we did 16 videos from EICMA in the course of a few days, there'd be someone who's like, well, why didn't you cover this or this? You know,
Yeah.
There's always someone who wants more. And you can be that guy today because you can go into the comments of that video and say, why didn't you compare it to a non-Skyhook bike?
Yeah, I could. I'll do that once we've finished here.
Anyway, impressive. But the question was, when are we getting one for testing? I've already emailed Suzuki saying I'd love to get the ATAR and the GX for testing. I believe it'll be next year, probably not for a little while. But as soon as there is one, I'll be badgering them because I think they both look quite impressive. Back to the CBR 600RR with Felix D 4015. And he asks, do you have any confirmation if Honda will bring this model to the North American market? Interesting one. I mean, the thing is, despite our biggest audience being in the US on our channel and being very much a global channel, like we have viewers all over the world. Same for the podcast as well, looking at the analytics there. We have to deal with the PR team in our respective markets in order to get hold of press releases and motorcycles and things like that. So they actually usually don't have any information about what bikes are going to be available in North America. So it's not even worth asking most of the time. But it's a funny one because Honda don't always launch things over in the US, even though it's such a big market. And from my experience as well, a US audience is strong on content about Honda from what we see. So they like Honda bikes, or some people over there do. But yeah, it was like the Transalp got launched last year, and then it was months and months and months before it got announced for the US. So I would say, hopefully, you know, they'll hear about it later and it'll get announced. But at the moment, I don't have any information on that one. Next one, mate. Sorry, I'm just wholly answering some of these, but I don't think that one's necessarily...
I don't want to wade in on the ones I don't know. Unless you want a completely unintelligible answer on some of these, you just crack on.
Just like an AI, why don't you use ChatGPT? Answer this question for me. What's the difference between... Oh, sorry, this is from Nomadic AG 5599. What's the difference between the discontinued Honda 600 and this new release version? And why did they stop production? And what made them bring it back? This is honestly, I think, one of the most engaged with bikes that's been launched. People are very excited about 600s coming back. I think it's a nostalgia thing as well. Because people rode these bikes in the 90s and stuff and rode the arse off them as well, because you know they're not big super bikes or big 1200 adventure bikes. So there are small differences, like I said, tweaks to every little bit if you look through it. And there's just small things like they've made the fork legs 15 mil longer so that there's more range of adjustment in terms of geometry. So you can drop it down through the forks or raise it up to make it a bit more chilled out. That's a track bias feature. A new TFT display. It's got a lap timer built in. It's like a really visible LED rev gear shift indicator. So it's all track stuff. Realistically, the tank shape is not only to get your chin down, but I think they've also allowed you to bring your arms narrower. New aerodynamics, a new shape of screen that's for a range of positions on the track. So it's really a focused machine.
Yeah. I'd say for me, it's it sounds like, and I'm basing this on kind of external knowledge of it. I haven't done power figure comparisons, but in terms of bringing models back, it seems like in actual fact, because of certain restrictions, they are, if anything, slightly less powerful, but maybe they tweak it so it makes it in a different area. In terms of improvements, generally across the board, it is improvements in braking, suspension, technology, basically. The other stuff that make the bike good. So in terms of engines, I don't think huge leaps forward in terms of performance.
It's similar. Right? I think there's tweaks, It's a good question, though, as to why this particular class of bike, the 600s, have been dropped. And then now everyone's getting back on the bandwagon. I guess it's like emissions and sales numbers. Like, if they're not selling very many...
They didn't make that much sense, though, did they? Because if the people are using them on the road, like you say, for the track, if this is track focused, then that's one thing. But if it's using them on the road as people used to... Again, restrictions on just riding on the road are tighter than they used to be. So and it just doesn't make as much sense when you could be. I mean, like, you know for yourself, right? The day you made the shift to go into an adventure bike and sit upright, it's a really hard sell to then go and I'm going to lean over and do this again for like commuting for everyday riding. You just don't want to go back to the cramped over position. So the market changed.
I don't think I could have a sports bike as my only bike. I like to have the adventure bike. And then I've got the SV650R. So when I get on that, I'm like, this is fun for a little while. Yeah. But for the majority of riding, especially if you ride for work and it's a practical tool or you commute, it's much more appealing. So yeah, I think the market shifted. People, started to like other things. Also, the market is aging probably. So people are becoming a bit more practically minded and perhaps a little bit less live. And then also, it really feels like we've just gone through a period of lots of emissions regulations, Euro 4, Euro 5, now it's Euro 5 plus. And so maybe looking at the sales numbers, it wasn't quite worth continually updating it so frequently in order to be able to keep selling it, because you've got to homologate the bike again, even if you make little changes. There's a whole kind of process that costs lots of money and time. Maybe we're at a point now where it just feels like worth it again. I mean, they had been selling this bike, like I said, in some Asian markets. It was updated in 2021, I believe. And now it's kind of been brought out over here. So maybe it's more the question that, like, okay, Euro 5 plus, we're just going in there now. Maybe it's worth getting the bike out there because they know they'll get a couple of clean years of being able to sell it without updating it. It's a guess. That's a complete guess.
No, I think it's fair. You don't want to spend money developing something at the tail end of a certain emissions thing and then have to redo the same work. You want to get in there day one, so you've, like you say, you've got a decent span of being able to sell that bike, whatever it might be.
Fingers crossed for it. Now, Carlos IAAC asks, well, it's not an ask, it's a nothing on the rumoured CBR Hornet 750. I was hoping they'd announce it at EICMA. So again, on the sort of Honda sports bike front, the Hornet 750 was fantastic. A brilliant bike, very affordable. And that platform gave birth to the Transalp 750, a great adventure bike, a good option in that sort of mid and more affordable market. And then it was expected they'd come out with a CBR sports bike version, which I think would be actually pretty good. If you look at the power figures, it's more like 90. So it'd be a bit up on something like an R7. Yeah. And they can obviously do it in terms of the visuals and the sort of chassis required because they've got lots of similar bikes like that. Yeah. But yeah, nothing was announced. And I just wonder if it's because they've been talking through the options, haven't we? CBR 500R is a parallel twin. CBR 650R is a inline 4, but quite chilled out in the riding position. CBR 600RR now is a more focused track 600 with an inline 4 as well, but more revvy, all the powers at the top end. And then you've got your full fat Fireblade if you so wish. So maybe there's just no room for a budget sports bike. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it's not sort of crying out for it. But yeah, it would have they decent playmates if they were to do that, like you say, because there's quite a few,
You fit right into that market, wouldn't it? With the R7, Ninja 650, the new Triumph, the new Suzuki. It's just having that inline 4 CBR 650R, maybe it's too similar. And whereas with the nakeds, there's so many nakeds sold that the Hornet and the CB 650R can coexist. Maybe sports bikes are a bit more niche, and so it's not worth having two pretty similar bikes on the market. Got to say as well, is it the MCIAA, Motorcycle Industry, or MCIA, is it? Motorcycle Industry Association? That's it, yeah. In the UK, they put out sales figures, press stats. You can get a kind of PDF summary of each month of motorcycle sales in the UK. I was looking at October, not exactly peak biking season, and still the Hornet is the best selling, like 750 plus bike, I think. Yeah. Wow. 751 to 1,000 cc's. It was the best seller in August.
Fair play.
What about the other months? Not quite in July. That was the Tracer 9, but August, CB750 Hornet. September, CB750 Hornet. I sold 200 of them in a month. Wow. October. Wow. CB750 Hornet. So like, yeah, it's the best selling. The only thing that's beating it really is the GS.
Right, yeah, standard.
But like, and the GS Adventure, in terms of the 1,000 cc plus, but in that sort of 750 to 1,000, it's kicking some serious butt. So maybe that's part of the surprise that they aren't doubling down on the success of it and making other variants, but or maybe it's just doing its job alone.
But maybe they just don't need to. Yeah, exactly. Maybe they don't need to because of that.
Unknown PS asks, why do they make new adventure bikes that you need to remove the tank to access the air filter. Seems like a massive step backwards. Now, if you're riding off-road a lot, it's going to get dusty and dirty and nasty. And so you want to be able to quickly take it out and clean it.
Yeah.
I think actually, like, you know, there was a period of time, like my Tiger 800, where I might be right that you have to take the tank off basically to get at it, which isn't great. And then maybe we had some more practically designed bikes. Is the Tenere quite easy to get at? Tenere 700 air filter.
Your guess is as good as mine. Give Google it. Yeah, there we go.
Let's have a little look, mate.
I'm going to say, I'm going to plump for take the tank off.
I think it's behind the tank, just under the seat, because they've obviously designed it in a way that
Sensibly.
that's what people love about it. It doesn't have like all the fancy rider aids, but it looks like a relatively simple job. I might be wrong, but I can see the tank bolts still on, maybe. I don't know. But anyway, I believe stuff like the Desert X, you have to take it to a dealer, they say.
Yeah, I was going to say, I thought you were going to say the Desert X has been designed so you can actually get the air filter out. I was like, that doesn't sound very Ducati to me.
Yeah, they suggest you take it to a dealer.
Yeah, that sounds more Ducati to me.
Yeah, so I believe that is a bit of a pain on some of the newer bikes. It does seem like a big... You can probably do it yourself, but yeah, they advise you take it in. I guess it's just indication that people don't actually... Like, the majority of adventure bike owners do fit the Starbucks cliche and don't actually ride them off-road.
Yeah, or if you do, you're not taking it on a proper dusty trail. You're not taking it in a desert. You're doing a little bit of light green laning. A little bit of mud.
One of the most impressive bikes, mate, from EICMA was the CFMOTO 450 MT. A lot of the audience were saying, go and check out CFMOTO. And so although the kind of more niche Asian manufacturers don't tend to do that well on the channel, I just went and had a look at that one. And I was so impressed with it that I made a video, and it just looks like it ticks all the boxes. It's like a baby Tenere.
Yeah, I thought I saw it, yeah, because I've watched all your content. I think I genuinely have.
Let's assume it's going to be more affordable because it's CFMOTO built and they haven't gone crazy with the spec.
Yeah.
It looks cool.
Yeah.
It's got spoked wheels. I think it's a 21 front.
Yeah.
17 rear or 18 rear. I think they're tubeless as well, so good news for most people.
Yeah.
Long travel suspension, 220 mil of ground clearance, folding foot controls, so if you drop it, they don't get smashed.
Clever.
Off-road foot pegs, where you can take the rubbers out and you've got a bit more grip. Off-road riding modes, where you can turn off some of the rider aids.
Yeah.
I think it's got a decent tank size, got the handguards. Bolt-on subframe, so if you drop it...
Yeah, no, it looks like a seriously appealing proposition.
Mate! It does everything.
I mean, it's got my favourite headlights on it as well, which is good.
Stacked.
I actually don't mind it in that configuration. It sort of works.
They've made it a bit more slab, like upright.
Yeah,
it
somehow
kind of works with the rally style, doesn't it? Just not every bike.
Definitely. No, but it's got, unsurprisingly, I think it's got somewhat KTM looks to it. Yeah,
a little bit.
Makes sense to me, but in a good way. I think that looks really at home off-road. And I gotta say, it is marking the shift, isn't it? Because I did the CFMOTO demo out in Spain, and we rode quite a few, and there was a fair difference between all of the bikes. We rode lots of bikes on the day, but some of them were older models, so it makes sense that they were a little less refined. And their newest models, I have to say, did feel like a big improvement. And I would imagine this is a similar kind of move forward, where it will feel better than the previous bikes that I've ridden from them, which actually still felt good. And I think it probably does mark the change. The shift, yeah, exactly. Where people... So, neither of us, I think, are old enough to kind of understand it fully, but I think people spoke kind of disparagingly about Japanese bikes back in the day being cheaper, cheaper to buy, but not as well made as like European bikes. Yeah. And that absolutely changed. So there are people citing that, like, this is it. This, it will happen in the Chinese market as well. The Chinese bikes will get to that stage where people took the piss out of them for a certain amount of time, and then they get to a point where it's just like, yeah, of course I have a Chinese bike. And I think CFMOTO are the ones that are going to break that barrier, I think.
I agree with what you're saying. I think looking at the bikes that you were testing for the main channel last year, there's always like it looks all right. It's good on price, but there's a trade-off in terms of performance and spec, and they always come up a bit heavy or a bit down on power or something. Yeah. And this is the first bike from CFMOTO and some of the other ones they had at the show where I was like, crikey, there's not really... I mean... TBC on build quality and how it rides and stuff. But just looking at the spec sheet, it does feel like things are looking a lot more serious now and competitive. And the build quality on them, in terms of the finish and what you can kind of assess from just sitting on the bike and walking around it, really does seem to be up there. And the design language, I don't know if it is that KTM influence now that they partner on some of their bikes, but the choice of color and the way that it looks in terms of the sort of contours of it is just getting refined. It's like CFMOTO are really finding their style, and they're not just trying any old thing.
No, and they're not. And I say it's got influence from KTM, but it's not like a copy and paste. They've gone their own way. Their 700s are that way as well. Where actually, if you look at their 700s, their kind of retro scrambly type bike, it doesn't look like anything else. It genuinely doesn't, and it doesn't look bad either. It's a pretty looking bike. So yeah, it's nice they've actually got their own design language.
Onto the kind of looks on the last question. I think I've saved the most interesting question for last. YamT3148 said, why are Yamaha, Suzuki and KTM all making their bikes uglier? What horrible drugs are they on now? And will they ever switch back to weed again? Great question.
It's a good one.
Look, the big one is probably something like the 990 Duke. Did you see that?
Yep. So this one, can I say what I just said to my colleagues? I will. I haven't told you. This is fresh to you. To me, its face looks like Predator's mouth, and I hate it.
You one ugly
I hate it so much. It looks like a deconstructed, like someone's like, here's a sandwich, will you work it out? I didn't put bread there, it's deconstructed. It's like that. They sort of went, we've got all the parts of the headlight, and we just didn't finish it off.
Predator's mouth is so accurate,
right?
mate.
My colleague said that the headlight looks like they got all of the sort of parts, and they were like, oh no, the lens is here yet. No, they're not. Oh, we need to ship it. Oh, quick, just rush it out. It literally looks like they just sort of went, oh God, it'll have to do. Here you go.
I think we have to maybe describe it for our audio listeners, but the general vibe is like they've switched to Tim's beloved stacked headlights, but in not wanting to completely abandon their sort of signature headlight shape, which is kind of like this diamond, they've kept the daytime running lights around the outside and then just ditched the glass or the lens off the front, like you say. And so you've ended up with a bit of a void in the middle. I actually don't think I dislike it as much as other people, because if they hadn't put the daytime running lights around the outside, it wouldn't have looked very KTM, and it would have looked more like the Suzuki GSX-1000 or something like that. Or
that's fair, yeah.
But I mean, you don't have to like it, even if you can see their rationale.
Yeah, true. It's that's their job to figure out, and I think on this occasion, in my opinion, they missed. But they've always been the brand that is most divisive, I think, for looks. You either love it or you hate it.
Well, I believe, the solution here is that for the KTM, the 801 Svartpillen was spide testing. That looks quite nice. So hopefully that'll be out at some point. So that might be what you're looking for. It'd be a twin-powered Svartpillen. So same bike, hopefully, in many ways.
I think that's what Husqvarna sort of offer is you will get the same bike as the KTM if that's what you like, but if you just can't get on with those looks, then we've got an alternative for you. I think that's typically how they go.
Yeah, Scandi styling.
Yeah.
Suzuki, it is what it is. Their design language is always blue and angular, but I will say I think the GX looks better than the GT. And I don't mind the sports bike so much. So Yamaha, the MT-09 is always going to be divisive. But again, you've got the XSR. And did you see the XSR 900 GP with the fairing? Hang on, did we talk about this in the last one?
We did, because you mentioned that being one of the announcements, and we both agreed. Absolutely love the looks of that.
I saw it at the show, and they had, what I loved, we shot a video where we looked at the MT-09, and then the concept for the XSR 900 GP and the XSR 900, and then we had the production XSR 900 GP, and then the one with the lower fairing kit, which looks amazing for me. And it might be the solution for anyone who was hoping for the R9. It's basically that. It's a inline triple, but it's got clip-on bars, a fairing, and it's got some of the latest MT-09 tech, which the base XSR 900 doesn't have, like a better TFT display and stuff. What a cool bike, honestly. And so I'll leave on a high, I think. And so I actually think that Yamaha, although the MT-09 and stuff are an acquired taste, there's still stuff in their lineup that shows that there's some appreciation for the classic design shapes of a motorcycle.
I think it's a 50-50, isn't it? They can't have, every single bike can't appeal to every single person. So they've at least got something in their lineup that you could probably get on with looks-wise, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Some of them have leaned real hard into certain designs.
Well, we know your preference. You are a face man. However, you do not like the headlights to be stacked. Yeah. It's a good way to whittle down some of the stuff on the market. A brilliant insight. Thank you, Tim. And thanks to everyone for their questions. Really appreciate it. I always enjoy these ones. There's a few curveballs in there, usually. So good fun. We'll be next at Motorcycle Live next week on Friday. So we might pick our favourite bikes of the show. It's not going to be exactly the same as EICMA, though. There's some different bikes there that are specific to the show. So do subscribe, if you don't, to the YouTube channel if you want to see a pod from there. I'm looking forward to that. What about you?
So am I. Oh, yeah. I'm not. No, yeah, I was going to say I'm not looking forward to the trip up because it's
freezing.
That's always the sort of, it's always the first weekend where I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's it. Bike's going away for a little while.
Wrap yourself up, mate.
Yeah, I'll get nice and toasty and I'll wrap myself up and take pauses. But yes, very much looking forward to the show with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you then.
Bye.